I'm concerned that the president's plan lacks actual funding and instead would put a burden on state and local taxpayers to pay for those programs. This would be particularly catastrophic in a state like New York, which gives more in federal tax dollars than it receives from the federal government. You remember hearing that from Senator Moynihan, who documented that many years ago. So if New York is getting less in tax dollars and giving more, already pays some of the highest taxes in the country, it would be unfair, in my judgment, to force New Yorkers to pay for even more, particularly when many infrastructure developments and economic gains in New York benefit the economy of the entire nation. Do you have more details about how President Trump plans to pay for his infrastructure plan? And how will you ensure this infrastructure plan doesn't force states and localities to raise taxes to pay for federally directed projects?
The president has always emphasized the need for new infrastructure, and he has talked about $1 trillion. $200 billion of that would be direct government funding. Some of the monies will come from sale of public assets, and then the remainder will be a combination of partnerships and cooperations between the public and the private sector. And through leveraging up, through use of the federal dollars, which will be used like a seed capital, that will allow more innovative, more creative financings, and that leveraging through public-private partnership is actually very often seen. Right now, we have certain states that don't allow the private sector to fund public infrastructure. And so we want to be able to let the private sector come in, and if they want to, fund public sector infrastructure projects, and if there are ways in which they can participate that will help alleviate the burden on taxpayers, I think that's something that we should welcome.
But I know you know the town of Harrison, and I know that my constituents would be very upset if their taxes are going up to pay for responsibilities of the federal government. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I'd like to continue this discussion because most people today who responded to President Trump were people who said, I'm tired of paying taxes that keep going up and up. And President Trump was very forceful about infrastructure, creating jobs. So I don't think they knew when they responded to his comments that they're going to pay for those infrastructure
They're going to pay either
projects.
way. If it's $1 trillion in direct government funding, that's taxes.
That's taxes, but it's the federal responsibility. And when you see all these cuts that we have in the domestic side of the budget, there's a real concern. So
which is why we need the private sector to be involved so we can leverage their input and their participation as well.
I am delighted to have the private sector involved, but I don't want frankly, the responsibility for these major infrastructure programs that the president talked about and how he was going to create jobs fall on the tax base of our local citizens.
Madam Secretary, good to see you. Welcome to the Hill. Good to see you outside of Kentucky, although we love you back there as well. Infrastructure, of course, is the name of the game this year. We are all tired of traveling on chokehold streets, bridges that are falling, waterways that are not being traversed properly, and the like. So we share your enthusiasm for doing something big on infrastructure improvement. I noticed on page 2 of your statement where you list the key elements, key principles of the infrastructure plan that will involve 13 federal departments and agencies in concert. The first principle that you list is that the monies would be made spent on the most transformative projects. Tell me what that means.
I think the president would like something that is bold, that is innovative, something that will really speak to the future and address the concerns of the future. Having said that, I understand your question, and that is you're concerned about rural America.
Yes.
And I come, as you know, from a state that is very rural, so I am concerned about access, ridership, and the ability of rural America to be part of the American dream as well. There will be a separate title to the infrastructure proposal that will address rural America. The dollar amount has not yet been decided, but we are very cognizant of the needs of rural America.
Where is the center of the effort to finance, to study how to finance the infrastructure improvements? Where is that research going on? Is that in your department?
You might want to push the talk. I think you asked how would this all be paid for?
Yeah, and I'm asking who is studying that portion of the problem?
The White House, all of us. Prior to your arrival here, we talked about various different ways, that there's a plethora of ways, 13 to 17 different very commonly discussed ways to pay for infrastructure. As of yet, no decision has been made, no agreement, I should say, has coalesced. None of the payment forms are ideal. At this point, suffice it to say that nothing is off the table. And as you mentioned, there are about 16 different government agencies around the infrastructure task force that's grappling with how to pay for all this.
Well, given the financial situation of the country and of the states and localities, it's pretty plain that the money to do whatever we're going to do has got to come from somewhere else, i.e. private sector. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and again, in an effort to be bipartisan, I understand that our colleagues, our friends on the other side would prefer 100% federal funding of $1 trillion. And I had just said that unfortunately that would increase our deficit quite a bit, and it would actually also create some havoc within the private markets because it would be such a large presence of federal dollars. So the president is looking more toward using $200 billion in direct federal funding in infrastructure, using that as seed money, and selling off some public assets, and using the federal amount to entice or to partner more with the private sector in some creative, innovative public-private partnerships, which we have seen in the past.
Yes. There's examples of this. For example, Indiana, 10 years ago or so, sold the cross-state toll road for billions of dollars, and then used those proceeds to build the roads around the rest of the state. Is that a possible way to go here?
Toll roads certainly are an increasingly popular way to finance infrastructure. But I am also cognizant, as I mentioned, I understand both sides, that some people may not like toll roads, but it's a very effective way to finance new roads.
All of us don't like toll roads, but some of us may tolerate tolls. But what I'm talking about is the selling of the asset. And I assume the buyer of that highway would need to enact tolls in order to pay off the purchase price.
This actually is a big issue, whether we sell off these public assets. And actually, there is a discussion going on about concerns about selling public infrastructure to foreign interest, and whether there is sentiment that that is not desirable. So we're thinking about some lease and buyback. I mean, these are one of many, many ideas that are being surfaced as to how we can finance it.
Good luck to you. Thank you.